This episode is brought to you by Brooks. You can feel confident wearing Brooks, knowing they're running specialists with over 100 years experience in the footwear game. They test runner insights and biomechanics with runners of every size, strength and experience to develop premium running products so you can run further, faster and happier. Okay, lads, we'll talk about the Brooks Aurora later, but Nitter, you're the intro man. Let's talk.
Well, welcome to the Inside Running podcast of the October edition 2021. Joined by my co-host, Tom DeCanto up there, the favourite for the Melbourne Marathon coming up in December. How you going over there at Walker Street?
I like it. Keep talking it up. Yeah, I'm good. Good, thanks.
Isn't Brett Robinson running?
Yeah, I don't know. Is he?
I'm asking Nitter. Nitter's the one making the favourite call.
I have no idea. So
how can you call favourite when you don't know who's in the race, Nitter?
No, I've heard big things from his coach. The pace that I ran a 3K the other night is apparently the pace he's going to run for the marathon. So, I'll buy you a coffee if you do that. That's for sure.
Very optimistic.
He is very optimistic. And Julian up there at Anglesey, your backyard looks like it's blowing over. Tell us a bit about that.
We have storms right now and no power, so I'm hotspotting off the phone and hopefully the battery and the laptop lasts. But we'll see.
Yeah, we had that storm here in Adelaide yesterday as well. It was pretty significant, to be honest. So no power, though. We kept our power. So utilities here in South Australia, we pay more for them. So that's the key. You pay more.
That's because you got the battery, right? The battery stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually operating. I think we do. Oh, yeah, we do out towards the Whyalla, I think it is. So.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but now we've got a special guest for you guys today as well. So you want to bring him on, Julian?
Here he is.
So today our guest is Dustin Joubert, and he's a running researcher. You guys might have seen him on Instagram recently. Things have went a bit viral for a period of time. He's done a PhD in exercise physiology, an associate professor at Stephen F. Austin State University, and he runs an Instagram account called the Lab Rat Rundown. So I think you're on Twitter as well. Is that right?
No, I don't have like an actual working account on Twitter.
Okay, so why Instagram as opposed to Twitter?
Oh man,
being a researcher.
Well, yeah. So that's funny. I had this is my first venture into social media outside of a personal account. So started on Instagram just because there's so much shoe stuff on Instagram, and so. The goal with that account was more to like relate to the people, the common runner, more so than, more like scientific sharing of stuff. I know there's a lot of academics on Twitter. I know that, but the Instagram account was a little bit different goal, I think.
Well, I guess it's fair to say, like for the past couple of years, there's been a lot more research. We've talked about it on the show before as well. The Hood Karma studies, the Barnes and Kildare studies looking at the running economy benefits of the Nike Vaporfly back from 2016 onwards. And everyone did sort of have anecdotes as to other shoes and sort of what their perceptions were and how much the other brands' super shoe equivalents, helped performance. And you performed a study that essentially gave a bit of an outcome of different super shoes on the market and their relative running economy changes. And similar to what Julian said in the last one, we've actually chatted about this before as well, is that I'd argue that, that the outcomes of the study were they matched people's perception differently. I felt like the shoe outcomes for the study did feel like the economy changes I was getting when I was running as well, but you just didn't know. So can you give us a bit of a synopsis of the study, what you did and what the outcomes came to?
Yeah, so we shared that preprint of the study. That's under review right now currently, but we compared, we got our hands on as many shoes as we could. So the goal was just of the top carbon plated shoes for a given brand. We tried to obtain as many as we can, which you guys know is a challenge, especially like to that in like a short window of time. So we had a limited budget in the time window that we had to like acquire the shoes. We were able to get the Alpha Fly, the Vaporfly 2, the Asics Metaspeed Sky, the New Balance RC Elite 1, the Endorphin Pro 1 from Saucony, the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2, and the Hoka Rocket X. So I think we had 7 carbon-plated shoes and 1 control shoe that was just kind of a standard racing flat. So notably missing, we couldn't get the Adios Pro 2 at the time. Well, it was in between the 1s and the 2s, and I couldn't get a hold of them. So But really, the goal of the project wasn't necessarily to say like this is the one best shoe and these others are bad. It's really to look like across the broad landscape of the carbon plated, these advanced running shoes now have things kind of leveled up and evened out. And so we were able, I think, to do that even if we're missing a shoe or two from that lineup. So yeah, we measured running economy, which is essentially the oxygen cost or the energy cost to work at a given speed. And we know that improvements in running economy allow you to run faster at the same physiological intensity, which is how we're seeing some of these performance benefits, right? And yeah, the previous work was really limited to the Vaporfly line. And so seeing improvements anywhere from, upper 2% to 4% plus improvements in running economy in that shoe. And so we compared all the shoes I listed there, and we saw that some did level up. Some offered some improvements more than the kind of traditional control shoe, and some didn't offer any benefit at all. So, and I, kind of expected to see that just from some case study testing I'd done on myself. But I really didn't know how many of the shoes would have sort of matched up to the established line. So we saw that the Alpha Fly, which you might expect, given that it's the same ZoomX foam coming from Nike, performed similarly to the Vaporfly 2. And then the A6 Metaspeed Sky was the other shoe that sort of leveled up in that 2.5 to 3% economy improvement range in our study. And so those three were statistically different than the rest of the shoes we looked at. The Endorphin Pro and the RC Elite 1 improved economy by about 1.5% on average, and that was better than the control shoe, but not quite as good as those top tiered shoes. And then the Hoka Rocket X and the Hyperion Elite 2 didn't really offer any benefit relative to the control shoe.
And the control shoe was the current ASICS Hyperspeed, is that right? Yep. Yeah,
we just needed a EVA non-carbon plated shoe that was similar in mass to the other shoes in the lineup. So
it's hard to find
now. Yeah. That type of shoe. It's a difficult
right,
thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think historically the previous papers always used like an Adios because at the time I think the world record was 202.57. I think prior to the super shoe era, and so they were using that as a baseline shoe. And I would argue probably the Hyperspeed probably at this point in time is one of those few shoes you can find that probably is close to traditional, but it's not really traditional still, is it?
Yeah, and I think, in those previous studies when they were looking at like, okay, this is the new Vaporfly shoe, let's compare it to the other best marathon racing option out there. That made sense, right? With this, it was like, okay, that's not even really in consideration anymore. And so we just needed a shoe that was similar in mass. That's a challenge with we opted for more of like external ecological validity to say, like, what's the best shoe of what's out there? And some of the previous studies have like tried to mass match the shoes. But that doesn't make a lot of sense to me to like try to mass match the Alpha Fly and the Vaporfly because you don't have that decision on race day, right? So when we look for a control shoe, I really just wanted something that was kind of in between all of the shoes in the lineup, which the shoes in the lineup are pretty small range in terms of weight.
Dustin, how many runners did you get to test each shoe? So how many people were in the study testing them out that you got an average from, or was it just one?
No, so we had 12 competitive runners. The qualification criteria for the study was sub 1730 5K. So not elite runners, but competitive age groupers. The speed that we tested at was 16 kilometers per hour, which is, corresponds to that's 6-minute mile pace. You guys can do the kilometer conversion for me. So 16 kilometers per hour is probably the most tested like running economy speed with the shoes and the lit. So that's what we went with. Some of the previous research had looked at 18 kilometers per hour, but you need really fast guys to do that, just because for running economy testing, you need to make sure it's sub-maximal and like below threshold, because we're really quantifying energy expenditure from the aerobic component. So it needs to be easy enough. So that 1730 kind of criteria did that for us for 16 kilometer per hour testing. But I live in rural East Texas, and we're a couple hours from like any major city center. And so to find guys who were like size 10, 10 and a half, 11, who could run sub 1735K, it was the summertime. So the university cross-country kids weren't even really around. So it was a challenge. Most of our subjects traveled a good 180 plus miles round trip to come to each study visit. So,
wow.
So we tested them each on 2 occasions. So on each visit, they tested every shoe in a random order. And then they came back on a second visit and tested the shoes in the opposite order. And then we took the averages to kind of limit any sequence effect with that. And then that's the comparisons we made.
Dustin, what I found really interesting, and I think was great that you included it, is the subject specific data. So in the paper, there's a really nice graph, and you can see how each individual, so the 12 subjects, you can see how they responded to each one of those shoes. I think more studies should do that. That was quite interesting. So if any listeners are sort of, I think we can put a link to it, possibly that preprint of yours, but because obviously the alpha came out on top, but there were some runners, and I got fired because I don't feel like I personally respond to the alpha, but obviously that kind of was the highest percentage gains on average, but there were some runners. I think there was about 5 in your study that were actually better in the Vaporfly as opposed to the Alpha Fly.
Yeah. When we look at statistical conclusions, there wasn't any difference between the Vaporfly, Alpha Fly, or Metaspeed Sky. And then on the individual level, those were really the top 3 shoes for everyone. Now, which of those 3 was like the top shoe, that varied. And that, that goes to individual preference, still matters to some extent, right? It's not like we're disregarding personal comfort and how much you like a shoe. But some of it's hard because, there are runners who maybe didn't like the Vaporfly, but that was their best shoe economically or something, right? On the individual level, people weren't really that great at predicting what shoe they were most economical in. And yeah, the Vaporfly Alphafly thing is intriguing to me for some follow-up stuff, potentially, just because we see some of the biggest responders in the Alphafly, but you also see some people who like really don't like that shoe, like you described, and maybe were poor responders. So there's more variability in the response to that specific shoe, whereas like the Vaporfly is a much more consistent shoe in terms of responses. But like, yeah, we didn't have any like 4% plus economy improvements in the Vaporfly, I don't think, but we had 3 or 4 guys do that in the Alphafly. So,
Justin, did you take any other data to run alongside the economy? Like, did you take any RPE data to measure whether people found the shoe easier to move in, or did you take any comfort scales at all to see if people preferred one shoe over another as well?
Yeah. So during the actual testing, I tried to avoid asking them any kind of subjective stuff, but at the end of the testing, prior to giving them any of their economy data, we did take some survey data to try to get at this idea of like, one, would their shoe preference for like racing a 5K or racing a marathon actually match up with the shoe that was most economical for them? And so we saw like on the group level, there was a pretty good correlation between like the economy rankings for the shoes and people's preference to race a marathon. They were a little bit more accurate in their like shoe selection there when they thought about marathon racing as opposed to 5K racing, which I think probably deals with like the shoe mass issue. People just kind of gravitate towards the lighter shoe. And we also had them rate things like how soft the shoe was, how much energy return they thought it had, some subjective things that tended to correlate a little bit. I think given that all the shoes had a carbon plate and among the experimental shoes, like their rigidity or stiffness rating didn't really correlate well with like the economy benefits. But given that we think, a lot of what's going on is the foam, the shoes that were rated like more springy tended to correlate a little bit better with the economy benefits. But overall, I'd still say people aren't that great at the individual subjective predictions. But
so would you think so obviously they've all got all those experimental shoes have carbon plates. So it's obviously not as simple as throwing in a carbon plate and getting these huge performance gains or economy gains. So do you think it's pretty much as simple as it's really comes down to the foam, or is there what do you think are other factors involved there?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as simple as that, but I think that's probably the big factor that most of the research is leaning towards now, right? So there's been some reviews on just carbon plated longitudinal bending stiffness stuff in general, and it's kind of equivocal to findings there. One of the recent papers from Wouter Hoekammer, and Healy, they sliced up the plate in the next percent, right, and saw economy wasn't really affected. The foam still did most of the trick. So I don't think that means like the plate's not essential, but probably the foams are what's driving most of these differences. Yeah, but I mean, the shape of the plates differ, the geometry differs, so it's probably not the only thing, but it's looking like probably the big thing.
Dustin, I once talked to the VP of innovation at Nike. We had a lucky meeting with him, and he talked about how they tested each Nike shoe for like their top athletes, and some of them decided more on feel, and some of the science-based athletes decided on what sort of economy benefit they got. Is that something that your athletes in the study took away? Have they gone out and started purchasing the shoes that work for them?
That's a good question. I need to. I had three of the guys ran Boston shortly after the study was done, and I think one of them I know went and got his best shoe from the lineup. But yeah, a lot goes into that. And the thing with the economy stuff, it's like if you're only like 0.5% better in one shoe versus another, that's probably like fairly negligible, right? When you start getting like 1% plus for same day testing, 1% plus probably starts to be more real. 2% plus definitely. And so if you're kind of in between or pretty close on a couple shoes, I definitely think personal preference, comfort, brand loyalty, those things probably are still meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but I think we had some stubborn ones too that are pretty loyal to maybe some brands that.
But it's crazy. We've got this this era of running shoes right now where people are really interested in how different the shoes can make them perform. Like we're in this real performance aspect of footwear innovation, even for recreational runners. So in saying that, going back in retrospect, what your background in running and research background, what led you to sort of take up this research into to footwear and running economy currently?
Yeah, so I've been a lifelong runner, and I got into the field of exercise science and went down that academic pursuit to, initially try to make myself faster, and I got more serious about my own running again in the last couple of years, and obviously I've like kept track of this is a sub 2 hour marathon and the new shoe developments and all that research, and I was just like every other average consumer, like gonna buy a carbon plated shoe and try it out and see how it did. And I ran in the Carbon X from Hoka for a whole marathon, my first marathon build up, and raced in that shoe and bonked terribly in my marathon. Probably more to my undertraining than the shoe, but my first experience in that shoe was I could tell that the shoe was more rigid and stiff, right? And so I was like, well, maybe it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. But before I bought the second version of it, I was like, well, I got a lab with a metabolic cart. Why don't I test the shoe out? And it basically didn't improve my economy at all compared to my standard flat that I had. And so I was like, well, man, this sucks. Maybe I'm just a non-responder. But so I'll buy the Alpha Fly and test it in the lab before taking it out on the roads and keeping them. But sure enough, I'm a huge responder. I'm like 4.5% plus in the Alpha Fly. And that was kind of I did the case study deal and presented that at a little regional meeting, and was like, okay, I'm going to try to get my hands, get a small grant internally from the university and get my hands on as many shoes as possible, because it just seemed like then it was like, man, how many people are being fooled by this, right?
Intuitively, when you first stepped into the Alpha, what did you feel? Were you like, whoa, this is different?
Exactly. I think when I put a new shoe on now, because I've tested a lot of stuff now, that's kind of the idea with my lab rat rundown account, is more case study testing than it is. It's hard to put out a new full blown study every week, right? But I can case study myself pretty regularly. So when I put a new shoe on now, that's what I look for, is like, is the foam squishy? Like, and that makes sense, because we know enough about like the mechanical properties from that original Vaporfly paper. Like the shoes that are more compliant and compress and deform more, they store more energy, and then the good foams also return that energy. A greater percentage of it. And so if the shoe feels squishy, that might be a good thing, right? And we can kind of start to think like, okay, this one feels really soft, but it doesn't feel like it bounces back much, right? Or this one doesn't deform at all. And so that's what I kind of look for when I put on a shoe now. And definitely, like when you put Zoom X on, that's the sensation I get, right?
Can you give us an idea on? I put up a like a question thing on Instagram yesterday, getting some listeners to ask questions, and had quite a few wanting to ask you about if you have tested and your thoughts on the Adidas Adios Pro 2 and also the New Balance RC Elite 2. And I know that from your account you've had a little play around with those. Can you give us an idea on like your personal experience with those?
Yeah, so I'll limit that to my personal experience because I haven't done any like larger scale testing, but the Adios Pro 2 I did test, and I didn't respond well to that shoe. So I was my usual 3-4% self, and like anytime I do case study testing now, I do everything on the same day for any comparisons I'm making, and I use the same control shoe, and I always test the Alpha Fly against it too, just because I know those are kind of my extremes. So I was usual like 3 or 4% in the Alpha Fly, but I was only 1% or so in the Adios Pro 2. And just when I think like just personal feel, that foam feels a whole lot different than Zoom X. So
it's
I can't,
you can't squish it as much, can you?
Yeah. So I can't make the conclusion that shoe's inferior to the Nike shoe. We haven't done that study, right? But from those personal kind of perceptions, feelings, I'm also, I'm testing in our study, we tested at 16 kilometers per hour. Most of the case study stuff I'm doing is about that same speed. So, I can't speak for people who are running much, much faster in that shoe. Obviously, on the world level, people are running fast in that shoe, right? But we did. That's the anecdote. We don't have the testing data on that.
Yeah.
And the New Balance, I saw you put it up on Instagram that you have it. Have you had a crack at it? Because one of our friends of the show, Ali, she's a New Balance sponsored athlete, and when the new one came out, I was like, immediately we're like, okay, game changer compared to the V1.
I have it in my closet. My teaching responsibilities got the best of me this week, so I haven't got on the Met cart. So I think looking at the timeline, I think Monday I'll get on the Met cart with it. So
all right, follow the page.
So yeah, we'll see. If I stick with my kind of theory on the foams, same foam, a little bit more of it. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see much difference, but it'd be interesting. People have said a lot of similar to what you said is comparing that to the V1. People have spoken really highly of the V2, but so we'll see.
Yeah, there's going to be. Sorry, you go, Tommy.
No, you go. That's good.
I said there's probably going to be a small effect to the actual lever or the stack height itself as well. And the RC Elite 2 definitely has the higher stack than the V1. I always found the V1. That was the biggest thing I was surprised by in the paper was the positive outcome from the V1 from New Balance. I always found that to be a shoe that didn't feel quite as economical as say the Endorphin Pro or the Metasky Speed. So you created these in the study. We'll obviously add the post to the show notes, but you had like these tiers. So you had the Metasky Speed on top, but then you had the Endorphin Pro and the RC Elite 1 in that second tier through there. And so they came out quite similar, but there was variation there, wasn't there? I remember you mentioning that the Endorphin Pro and the RC Elite had slightly different outcomes in relation to not just running economy, I believe. There was a small change between those two shoes and another variable.
I don't know if they differed on anything else so just when we ran the statistics, they differed in those top tiered shoes and then the control and lower tiered shoes. They were similar to each other in terms of economy of benefits. Yep. We looked at some running mechanics variables and there wasn't the effect sizes are a lot smaller in some of those mechanics differences. But I don't think it was different between those two.
Okay.
That was another question, Dustin. Like, from some of that biomechanical stuff you ran, or possibly just your thoughts from seeing the runners? So just your gut feel. Is there a reason? What reasons do you think there are responders or high responders versus low responders? Like things like body weight or biomechanics, running experience. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So when we looked at the top 3 shoes overall to kind of make some of those comparisons. And really, it's kind of just descriptive because to really design a study that's like powered to make statistical conclusions for those kind of things, we need larger samples. You need separate groups of people. Most of these studies where we're looking at like economy differences, it's a lot easier to find stuff. But we did see that like the top half of responders to those top 3 shoes that responded more in like the 3.5% plus range. They were less economical to begin with, which would kind of make sense. They've got more room to gain, right? More margin to gain. Or the kind of, if their last elasticity that's in their muscles and tendons and feet aren't doing the trick, right? The shoe's helping them more than someone who's maybe already capitalizing on some of those things. But they mechanically they differed too. Just on a descriptive level, like observationally, we see they had the people who were bigger responders, who were less economical to begin with, also tended to be the slower cadence folks, a little more vertical oscillation, longer stride length, right? And so, but it's kind of, are those things the reason they're less economical to begin with? Or are those things the characteristics that help them respond more in the shoe, right? I've got some piloting stuff I'm going to do with like some cadence manipulation and see kind of there's its own problems with that, because you're going to mess people's mechanics up and make them probably all less economical to begin with. But I think I think I'm more intrigued by that too, going back to that like Vaporfly Alphafly comparison, because we did see some like larger distinctions there. Some of like the stronger correlations between like vertical oscillation increases and responsiveness to the Alphafly look a little bit stronger than for some of the other shoes. I'm not a biomechanist. I'm an exercise physiologist. So anytime we get like too much into the nitty gritty of mechanics, I'm out of my lane a little bit. But it seems like if you're not really like loading up all that extra foam, then maybe you're not getting like the full benefit from it, right? So it does make some sense to me that like, larger runners, faster speeds, you're going to have more ground reaction force, but slower cadence, more oscillation. That makes some sense to me. And I think the guys who were like really low responders to the Alphafly were like the 185 plus cadence guys at that pace. And it's almost, you can almost like see that they like resist the bounce, resist riding the shoe. Yeah. Like if y'all have run in that shoe, you feel like if you like ride the bounce a little bit, it just kind of feels right, huh?
I literally felt that when I was running in it, that it wasn't letting me maintain. I prefer a quicker cadence, and it just didn't feel like it was letting me do that. It's probably part of the reason I didn't enjoy running it as much as the Vapor.
Yeah.
Dustin, I have a retail store, and we've been in lockdown for a long time, where we've done a lot of phone consults, that kind of thing, and we have customers interested in super shoes. And just from experience, like we see a real correlation to your study in terms of who enjoys Alphafly versus Vaporfly, and the safer decision to go for the Vaporfly for someone who can't get in store and try them on. We like the way that I've described it to customers is Alphafly is either you really love it or you don't really enjoy running in it at all. And the Vaporfly is everyone pretty much enjoys running in that shoe. So it's funny that your study came out on a similar level like that.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the Alphafly is just a wonkier shoe, right? Like it's gonna be kind of more bothersome to some people, I think, right?
The other question I had, and we get it a lot, is in your opinion, does say a 3.5 to 4.5, 5 hour marathoner, will they benefit from wearing a shoe like this?
Yeah, so we're doing that study right now. Actually, we've got about 7 people through already, and I just got women's shoes, so now we're adding women to that comparison. But we're testing all of the Vaporfly lit. Previously is pretty much 14 to 18 kilometers per hour. There's one study that tested at some like relative speeds that was slower paces, but their point of comparison differed. It was like compared to really, really lightweight flat or their own like trainer shoe. So I have more trouble like kind of interpreting that. But in terms of like similarly controlled study as the previous ones we've talked about, we're testing at 10 and 12 kilometers per hour, which would be relevant to your like 3:30 to 4:15 marathon runner. Because I think that's a lot of the questions I have are kind of like how people spend their money and like how the consumer running market is like approaching things, right? And so that one will be interesting. From my preliminary data and kind of working hypothesis, I think we'll probably see a smaller magnitude of economy improvements. But maybe still some benefits. The interesting thing is like how you translate economy to actual performance time improvements kind of depends on the pace too. And we know more about that already. Like if you improve economy by 4%, but you're racing at really fast speeds, that doesn't necessarily translate to 4% faster running times, because wind resistance is part of that, like the extra work to run at faster speeds. And so that might only translate to, 2.5% performance times improvements for 230 marathon runners and faster. There's some calculators out there that can help predict that. But like at slower speeds, that's more of a 1-to-1 ratio. So you might get more of that whatever percent improvement economy benefit you get, but we just don't really know the magnitude of the economy benefit you get yet at the slower speeds in those shoes.
And just sorry, one
you
more.
Go.
Have you sort of seen in your own research, or like as your opinion on the possible negatives to wearing a shoe like this for an athlete, not in terms of sort of longer term use, but on the day, like the instability issues or anything like that? Is there something that's popped up?
It's not something I've studied or really tried to look into. I try to stay in my lane, and that's not injury stuff and it's not mechanic stuff. So yeah.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. We all have an opinion, hypothesis, and all that here in this podcast. We're all out of our lane all the time. So, you mentioned briefly there your next study will be female specific. Can you give us a bit of an outline of what that study is going to look like, and a bit of a hypothesis of what you think the outcome may be?
Yeah, so it's this one we're testing at 10 and 12 kilometers per hour, comparing, just sticking with the established Vaporfly line initially. And I had the men's shoes already, so we just got some crowdfunding to actually purchase the women's shoes. So we're looking at men and women. I don't know if I expect big differences between men and women. I think I expect the magnitude of like the economy improvements to be smaller compared to some of the previous stuff we've seen versus faster speeds. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think if we go on this idea of like loading the foam less, you're going to do that you're not going to do that as much at slower speeds, right? Load the foam up as much. And so body weight would matter too. So mass, and then mechanics can differ between men and women, obviously too. So I would say in the Barnes and Kilding Vaporfly study, they did include men and women, and they saw similar improvements in economy they tested the women, I think, in that one at like 14 to 16 kilometers per hour.
I might just have one more question before we wrap up the chat on this this study that is all the stuff you're doing, which is really interesting. But I just wanted to know, someone also asked me about, or I get asked all the time about the durability of these shoes, and I know you've got a bit of personal data on. I think it's the Alphafly. You're sort of looking into how long those economy gains are lasting as the shoe wears. Can you give us a bit of a insight into that?
Yeah. So back to the idea of how we spend our money on shoes, right? It's like, when do I need to replace my Zoom X? So yeah, I've accumulated some miles in my personal pair of the Alphaflies, and so I was able to compare them just in a case study format to a fresh pair that we had for the study. And I did that at like 200 kilometers, 125 miles or so on my old pair, and they. Sorry, office phone's ringing. They perform. I was 4% better in economy in both the new and the old pair on the same day that I tested them. So that was nice. So if you got a 200K,
bad news for retail, Julian.
It's getting cut. Bad question.
I mean, obviously. I mean, people have sent me like pictures of like how torn up their shoes are after 30 kilometers, and they're all angry. And I'm like, well, so like my outsole wear is not destroyed, so then my foam is probably protected, right?
Well, Tommy, you got 900 Ks out of a Vaporfly, didn't you?
Oh, don't bring that up again. It really angers Julian. It really angers him. Don't bring that up.
Richest bloke on the show won't buy new shoes.
So I think by December I'll probably have closer to like 400K on that shoe. So I'll do that comparison again with our fresh pair.
400 will be interesting to see. That you might see a dip after 400.
Fantastic. Hey, Justin, have you got another 15 minutes available? We thought what we do on this podcast, we normally talk about our weeks of what shoes we've been running in this past month or so. We thought because you're a keen runner, you might be keen to join that part as well. We just discussed our training for the last month and what shoes we've been wearing doing it. You keen to stick around?
Absolutely.
All right. So, Tommy, you go ahead. You're training for the marathon. You're running over the 100-mile weeks. You give us a rundown. What shoes you've been wearing?
I've been pretty much wearing my usual lot. The addition to that has been the Brooks Aurora, which I think we're all going to have a little chat about because we all got a pair of these shoes. I've gone back to a little bit of the Invincible, just legs. Like I had a week about 10 days ago. My legs were just imploding from the mileage. Things caught up, so I was like,
what sort of Ks you doing? What sort of Ks?
I got up to like 188 1 week, and I was a bit, like just on the edge there. It's just like physically felt like in terms of energy levels and stuff, fine, but just the legs were getting really beaten up. So Nimbus Light 2.
It's because you've been running in lower shoes this past couple months, and obviously you haven't put an Invincible on for a while, have you?
I was doing some like easy runs in the Brooks Hyperion tempo, and I think I maybe overdid it. It was just like a bit. I run all road, and but like the Aurora, I really have been impressed with it. I was when we were chatting about what Brooks to get, I was really keen on trying this one out because I'd read some pretty interesting things about it. So this is like. So Brooks have this thing like this Blue Line Lab, so they experiment with some different models. So this is just like a totally new model from them, using this nitrogen-infused foam. So some specs on it, but essentially it's quite unique. It's obviously it's relatively high stack. Got a lot of this foam. It's a very broad platform, so that gives it some inherent stability. The interesting thing about it is this, which we chatted about, is this segmentation of the rear foot to the forefoot. So the shoe, when you look at the longitudinal bending, it bends in a very odd spot. So you do not normally see shoes bending like that where it bends. So that's one thing. But then also because it's completely segmented there, the torsional stiffness is low. So some shoes you go to bend and it's like quite stiff. Obviously this one is really low stiffness. It just bends. So it's pretty interesting. Like I actually find that, and I don't know what you guys think about it, but I think this is a thing that I like. I think I like the fact that it does that because as I hit sort of that aspect of the shoe, kind of like rear foot to midfoot, it just feels more fluid. Like I feel like that potentially that less stiffness makes it feel a smoother transition. I do know, like in the past, like wearing some of those traditional like Asics, like the GT 2000 and the Asics Pursue, which have like more of a traditional plastic shank, which is like has like high torsional stiffness. It feels slappy, and I reckon that shoes that are really stiff and you can't twist, to me, it correlates with like this feeling of like a real slappy ride. I didn't get that in the Aurora. It just felt smooth, felt stable, like. No, a big fan. Like I've been really enjoying running in that.
Tom, do you think it's the stiffness that creates the slappiness, or the actual trustic that they've used in a lot of their shoes? Because there are some stiff shoes that I mean, I felt similar about the older style Asics, but then I've put on stiff shoes like the Glide Ride and some of the like even the plated shoes that are very stiff, but they don't feel slappy.
I reckon that's to do with the softness of the foam. I reckon if you've got a real soft foam, it kind of the compression, the non-uniform compression of a very soft foam, I reckon takes away that feeling of stiffness. So it almost acts like it has more torsional flexibility because the foam is so soft.
And that's where the noise goes.
If you're in a firm shoe with high torsional stiffness, good luck. You're going to feel that torsional stiffness because the foam is firm.
Doesn't that sound horrible right there?
Firm shoe, stiff. No, not a
with
good
no
combo.
rocker.
I think if it's going to be stiff, you need a soft foam. Yeah, so I think that's how like all these carbon plated shoes get away with it not feeling slappy, is because the foam is soft and compliant. That's my thought anyway.
Julian, what are your thoughts on the Aurora? So it's the first time I've put on a shoe with nitrogen-infused foam. How have you found it? You're not normally a man for non-torsional stiffness.
Yeah, my body likes a bit of stiffness, especially my plantar fascia, and also my Achilles tends to like a stiffer, firmer shoe. But the Brooks immediately, like the foam underfoot feels good. this is new for Brooks. Even within their Hyperion range, I found like when I've put them on, they felt like they bottom out quite a bit. But their traditional foams, like their Ghost, Adrenaline range, Glycerin, they've got a lot of guts to them, but not a lot of that bouncy, poppy, springy feel. So the Aurora, to me, like before I'd even tried it, I had in my mind I would compare it to the Nike Invincible, just because we were talking about that type of foam and a lot of it. The foam does probably not. It doesn't feel as bouncy. I don't think any foam feels as bouncy as the Zoom X. But Duncan's backed us up on that one. But it felt light to me. It felt like quite a low drop. It was a little snug. I went out for 90 seconds. I'm battling a slight Achilles issue right now. And just that flexibility in the shoe felt like I was running in an older school Nike Free, and my Achilles just started to complain immediately. So I turned around and swapped it out actually for the Adrenaline 22, a sample of that shoe that's coming out maybe early next year, and immediately felt a lot better with a firm, stiff rear foot underneath my foot. So
I'm going to be honest, Julian, that sounds terrible as a swap in a shoe.
Look, it felt like honestly felt like a brick for the first 2 or 3 minutes after having the Aurora on. I'm like, oh, this is a savagely boring shoe. But within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, gee, the body actually likes this. And I can get this 7K run done with way less pain and way less worry. And especially as I fatigue late and I start landing a little sloppier and maybe more through the rear foot, that I actually appreciate more stiffness and a firmer foam back there. So I was glad I swapped. And now I haven't really... I did one more run in it, and I had a very sore Achilles that afternoon. So for me, that sort of flexibility back wherever it is, it's not working for me and my niggles. But Adrenaline 22, is something I'm going back to. And I mean, it's a dad shoe, but that's what I am now.
Yeah, it's true. Dustin, have you had any experience with like running into the nitrogen infused midsoles at all? I know a few brands have done that historically. I think Skechers may have done that as well.
Puma, maybe?
Puma, yep.
So I'm actually not a shoe geek. I'm pretty boring. I'm pretty boring when it comes to like my everyday running shoe, right? So I've geeked out on the performance and on the racing line. I have tested the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite.
Oh yeah.
In my case study testing. The Doctors of Running guys were nice enough to send me a pair of those to try out. And so I'm not. Is that one of the nitrogen infused foams? I'm not.
I think it is.
I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's so hard to keep track of exactly like what the proprietary foam names are and what the base material is versus what they do to it afterwards. I've kind of just like gone on feel of it. I did like that foam, but that's like a pretty petite shoe compared to how much stack is in the Alpha Fly. So I'd be interested to see how that shoe feels with more foam. But no, I'm boring when it comes to everyday trainer. If something works for me, I stay in it for years. The only thing I ever really care about, I've had long-term Achilles insertional tendonitis issues and had one Haglund surgery already, and I'm trying to keep the other foot from not needing it. And so all I ever care about is the heel counter in a shoe.
Yeah.
What are you running in? Yeah, what's the one?
I'm on like my 4th pair of the New Balance 1080 V10s. I think Running Warehouse finally is out of the V10 though. I'm gonna have to pay more for the 11s. So, although I've heard people tell me the 11s they changed the heel, so I'm worried.
Yeah.
That 10 was a nice shoe. The 11 is hit or miss, kind of like an Alpha Fly in terms of that heel counter. Some people adore it, but then there's others that like I'm the same. I can't get it right for the shape of my Achilles is wrong for that heel counter.
I'd be careful with Haglunds and that. Yeah. That heel cup. Yeah.
Yep.
Be careful.
Yep. Do you put a heel raise into most of your shoes then to manage it, or you just?
No, it's more. No. It's less about like because I wear like basically like zero shoes, my walk around shoes. It's more of like just pressure. Once it gets irritated. Yeah, the pressure. Once it gets irritated on the back, it can set it off, and so and it's just a subtle random thing. But I don't know the way the tins or at least are like bowed out and the kind of softer dimple in them has worked well for me, but
Well, I reckon the Brooks Aurora, like, I was really glad Brooks sent this shoe through. I think Tommy was the first person to bring it up and say, can we potentially get a hold of this shoe? And I've worn it for maybe 200Ks already in this month. I've worn it for more than any other shoe. And we were doing some comparisons with just the Nike Infinity at the time as well. Like Tommy and Julian haven't been massive fans of the Infinity. I think Julian's been okay with it. I loved it. This shoe I found to be a nice change. I've gone from wearing the Invincible and even the Hoka Clifton recently as well. But to have a shoe that's probably a little bit lower stack than those shoes, maybe similar stack at the rear. But I find it much more responsive. It's a poppy shoe. The nitrogen foam is relatively stable. And I definitely find this feels more like a shoe I can run fast in. So I've done a workout at about sort of tempo pace, and it responded fantastically. And I've done a long run, which they sort of, I think I'm a bit over wearing an Invincible, where you get to the end of a long run of, say, 75 to 90 minutes, and it starts to feel like it bottoms out and doesn't return much. But this shoe sort of keeps going the whole time. So I think there's a place for the nitrogen-infused foams as a training shoe, for sure. And I reckon at slow paces, pickup runs, it's a pretty versatile sort of shoe. I think that's probably the only problem with this particular shoe. I don't know exactly where to place it. I think it could be used for pretty much anything, but it is a concept shoe, I'm assuming, Julian, isn't it? Like they're testing the foam out, perhaps maybe to see if the foam is going to be applicable to future models of the Brooks line.
Yeah, and we're going to see it come through in their mainstream models. So that's something really exciting. I mean, I don't know whether I mentioned, but there's just extreme delays on factory production now coming out of Vietnam. And we're not going to see some of these new range until mid next year, when they were actually due at the start of the year. So one of those models was the Glycerin 20, and we were really psyched for that. We're just going to have to put it on pause for a little bit, but that's going to get some of this foam. And I mean, anytime you tweak a shoe like it's so mainstream, I get excited about with new stuff. Like we saw, even ASICS do it a bit different. They bring out alternates to their mainstream line, like the Nimbus Light, the Kayano Light, and we've had great success with those shoes. And and I think like when New Balance bring out the Fresh Foam X, and they put into their 1080, into their 880, like that's even better, because it means that those who are really loyal to a traditional shoe get to experience some of that fun stuff.
Yeah, the midsole of this shoe's a winner. I think if it goes into other Brooks lines, they'll do really, really well with it. Just a few of the details. I'm sure you were the same, Julian. It's a concept shoe. I'm not sure if they'll keep it going, but it's a bit narrow in the forefoot. The upper's quite strong, but it's just the volume of the shoe in the upper is probably a bit limited, I suppose. So it feels more like a performance shoe in that setting, because it is a bit less volume.
Yeah, and some of the specs, like it's a 6 mil offset, which I mean, that's a medium offset, I guess. It's not super low, but it's not super high. And the men's, I think it's a size 9, would be 240 grams. So again, something around that lightweight trainer area. And women's 215 grams, and still the same offset as well.
Brilliant.
So it's sitting in the lightweight trainer range.
You're back to running about 50 odd Ks a week now, Julian. What else are you running in?
Yeah. So I'm just starting to get back from this knee surgery, and I've had some niggles creep in, like osteitis pubis, and that's come back. I've got this Achilles thing that I'm like it's manageable. I don't really feel it when I run too much, except for when I wear that Aurora. So I'm wearing the Adrenaline 22, and then also the ASICS Glide Ride 2, which is nearly the perfect shoe for me right now, with a lower offset, so I can run with a little bit more, I guess, knee load, hip load for the OP, but still underneath the center of gravity. And the stiffness and the rocker in that shoe really helps my Achilles. I wear the 2E, which gives me more space up front. I love to be able to put a shoe on and just forget that it's on my foot, which a lot of the shoes that I love don't come in wider widths, like the Invincible and the Nimbus Light, those sorts of shoes. So the Glide Ride being a wide is brilliant for me.
Cool. I think we lost Nida.
Back. Cheers. Sorry, I fell out. That's good, Julian. So I found going back to Tassie I've been here the past 12 days and running over the hills, my OP popped up a little bit as well. But Left shoe seems to be a bit more effective when managing that. I found it can load my lower leg a touch more, which has been nice. So that's why I found the Brooks Aurora being a little bit poppier was good compared to the Clifton. So
Yeah.
And Tommy, you've got a 1,500 meter race coming up in preparing for your marathon
Tonight. Yeah.
tonight.
That makes no sense.
Yeah. Mate, look at my training leading into my half marathon PB, and I had like 1,500s, I had like 3K time trials, races. Yeah, short stuff's good for me.
Yeah.
I think it's
Dustin,
good.
to give a perspective, Tom, I don't know if you know, he's run what did you run, 62 and a half or 62 low for a half marathon?
62:13, I think it is, yeah.
62:13, but he hasn't broken 4 minutes for 1,500 yet, so he's running one tonight.
I'm going for the sub 4. I'm going for the sub 4 1,500. Not sub 4 mile, but sub 4 1,500. I'm going to get it.
I reckon you'll run 3:52.
No way. I got stitched up as
way.
well. The guy that's organising it, he put my seed time down as 3:45, and I'm like, my wildest dreams. My 400 PB is like 59 seconds. Like,
You need some victories, Tommy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. I've only got dragons. It's all right. Dragons will do.
And Dustin, you've tried out the dragon, haven't you?
I did actually, because I got one of the guys on the team, the cross country team here, to lend me his, and I tested them. We've got a Woodway treadmill, so you can run in spikes on it. All right. And I tested those against the Alpha Fly, just thinking, because that original Barnes and Kilding paper was making the point that the Vaporfly was probably a good or better alternative than a traditional distance track spike. Probably like 2.5% improvement or so in economy. But that was on the old spikes. Now everybody, I think, has kind of said, okay, Dragonflies must have closed that gap. And then on the world level, right, the 25 millimeter stack height rule kind of rules out the road racing shoes on the track. But I'm curious here, NCAA athletics over here, there's no stack height rules on the track. And so it seems like some of the, I don't know about for a, really fast paced mile, if that's an option, but certainly like 5K, 10K on the track, the higher stack shoe, I would bet for a lot of guys would be a benefit. Yeah. So I was better in the Alpha Fly. The Dragonfly did close the gap quite a bit. I think I was like, 3% economy improvement relative to the control shoe in the Dragonfly and like 4% in the Alpha Fly. So and that was my first time running. I hadn't run in spikes in forever either, but so I would imagine for a lot of people, faster speeds, a Dragonfly might edge out. For me, it was still the shoe, but.
Well, I raced a 3K on the track on Wednesday night in the Alpha Fly. So one thing I was saying in that shoe is that I didn't bring anything else with. I had that. I was almost going to wear the Brooks Aurora. So, but I wore the Alpha Fly, and it is a tough shoe to get going at top end paces. But I felt like I could run 72s the whole way, and it felt okay, except for the bends. Did feel like I was falling out the left shoe a little bit going around the bend. So I'd probably say there's probably a threshold, but someone who's inexperienced like me probably would run as well in the Alpha Fly as I would in the Dragonfly over those distances. But guys like Tommy who are hitting the ground 180 Ks a week consistently probably get a few more economy gains at those faster paces in the Dragonfly, I reckon.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
All right.
Oh, that's good.
Cool.
You're good.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dustin. That was fantastic. You're definitely a gun in this particular area. It's good to see your passion and personal interest in there as well. And if anyone else wants to follow him on Instagram as well, his page is very active at the moment. And the Lab Rat Rundown is the page. And a lot of his stuff is on there. We'll share it with the show notes for this page so people can jump on there. And yeah, so we're always interested to see how the RC Elite goes. There's a lot of questions on that, and obviously the Adios Pro too. So those things, you seem to be able to take the information and make it very applicable to the general population. So that's a really good skill of yours, Dustin. I think people appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
thanks.
You've done really well
Dustin.
with that page, Dustin. Thanks for giving us your time.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed the chat.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks, man. Take care. Cool. Is he gone? He's gone.
All right.
Good mind. He's from Texas. He had a Lance Armstrong in the background. Did you see that?
I didn't.
No.
I was almost going to bring it up.
Brought that
I thought
up.
it might be a sore point, but I love Lance.
Mate, you got a Lassie Varen back there, mate. So
Yeah, you can't
I
say
do.
shit with that.
Hey, what's wrong with Lassie Viren?
Blood doping,
Mate, come
baby.
Oh,
Come
mate.
on.
Yeah, but it wasn't even illegal back then. It was like advanced science back then.
That's what Lance said.
Yeah, it's true. It was advanced science. They went pretty well. That guy has a gun, isn't he? Absolute
I
gun.
think that was good. I think people get a lot out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, very good. I loved it.
Yeah.
People it's the study that needed to happen, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. He does it in a good manner though as well. Like he's not doing it in a really arrogant way. As a researcher, he's doing it as a guy, doing it as like almost a case controls, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep.
Cool.
Easy guys. All right.
All right.
All
Thanks a
right.
lot. See you next week.
We'll do. We'll see you later. Oh, Dustin's still there. Good.